I spent I spent a little bit of time with him a couple of weeks ago, a week or so ago, and I'm still going over my notes, and he was interviewing me. And I think one of the great things in life is when the student and teacher appear in both bodies at the same time, and nobody cares about being on top or being the teacher. And when you meet someone that like that in your life, and they start to become a mentor of yours, well, why wouldn't you be excited? So, John, I want to welcome you to this little thing that we do, which is about metaphysics and helping people start to manifest their own life. And for those of you who don't know, if this is your first time listening, I want to define this word aloha for you. Alo means divine or spirit, and ha is breath. So both John and I, speaking for John, we're wishing you aloha in this, that the spirit of the divine is on you and it opens your mind and you pick up a nugget or two, which would be substantial progress in anybody's life. We're all so sure that we're right all the time. Let me tell you a little bit about John. Before I met him, he actually went out to LA and he hooked up with an old group called the Taste of Honey. And shortly after John joined them, they had a #1 hit. You might remember Boogie Oogie Woogie. So here we are, right? Basically, your Saturday Night Live disco stuff. And that led him into connections and playing with Donna Summer, the Manhattan Transfer, the incomparable Ramsey Lewis, forget about it, Edgar Winter, Richie Cole. And then he went out on his own. And this is sort of a before and after. After he developed his own thing and became #1 on very prestigious Billboard for smooth jazz, a #1 hit for a guy that had always been sort of in the background. He stepped into the front row with great humility. And from there, John's delight in seeing other people take pleasure, because let's face it, jazz is one of the last few art forms in the United States, especially with our artificial intelligence, even more of it's disappearing. So a real creator, and created for himself a book called A Silent Architect, which was Invisible Architect. I did that wrong the other day too. See, he's still teaching me, which is great. This is because I'm excited.
But these are all good names. You last one you called Inner, and Inner Architect was my original name. I thought, wow, he's being telepathic. He thought about my original name, but now you've got another good name, Silent. That's pretty good.
Well, one of the things that we like to what we talked about when I was lucky enough to be on your podcast was you talk about the invisible architect. I call it the intuitive visitor. But we're on the same page. John, we always like to start off with a really simple question in metaphysics, and that is, everybody knows that they need to grow personally. But many people believe you grow personally and then experience a healthy mindset. Other people believe you've got to have a healthy mindset to actually have healthy growth. Up for debate, your answer. What do you think is most important first, personal growth leading to a healthy mindset, or does a healthy mindset really open up the pathway to healthy personal growth?
Well, that's sort of the genesis. When I asked that question myself, and I've met and been very fortunate to play with and interact with amazing people, and I discovered early on that, and you even mentioned it, be, do, have is better than have, do, be. Have, do, be is, yes, if I had connections and I had this and I had that, then I'd be able to do this, and then I could become somebody or whatever it is. And although there's some truth, like if I had a lot of money, I could go to college and get a degree, get whatever. But I found out that the best people actually went the opposite way. They became what they wanted to be in their own mind. So that brings us to mindset. And then they sort of hypnotized themselves with whatever methodology they used, auto-suggestion, affirmations, or just they were innately born with that visualization. And then they held that there, and that thought form then dictated the do, meaning all the decisions And it's funny, it seems like the invisible architect, the creator of all, the intuitive everything, comes into play and helps us co-create when it sees we have faith in its power. And you can't have that faith unless you have your be first. So to answer your question, I think it's the correct, clear, steady, consistent mindset that drives two things in the do, your supportive actions, and it sort of recruits, and this is the woo-woo part, right? The invisible architect to come in and help you. And even in the Bible, faith can move mountains. And in my book, I call advanced gratitude is synonymous to faith. So if you thank the Creator for what you're trying to achieve in advance, then you're showing him you have faith. So to answer your question, I think the mindset comes first. I believe, and I've had experience with that anyway.
Yeah, this seems to be serious metaphysical students like yourself seem to have no question about that, right? Money just makes people more what they are. So if we're not healthy in the first place, we're gonna be able to buy back more mistakes and keep doing the same things anyway. So here's an idea that you just triggered is that whatever we ask the universe for, it's going to say, okay, right? Our brain is going to work to validate what we've taught it to look for, good or bad or indifferent. But when we have a vision that's healthy for us, doesn't take anybody else's good, the universe is going to say, okay. But we have to be present. It doesn't really speak in words, it speaks in synchronicities. These doors open up. And I love what you said about faith will move mountains. The great Father Martin said, faith will move mountains, but you better bring a shovel. I'm sure John and you and I agree that it doesn't mean we don't do any work. This isn't get into the right vibration and the Ferrari will just show up in your driveway. But anyway.
Yeah, action is a supportive commodity. Action, got to take action.
Right. And so if you believe that with faith, meaning not a religious word, but with faith, belief that it's good for you doesn't take anybody else's goodness derived through service, that the synchronicities will start to show up. So we need to be in the present. Otherwise, we can't see them if we're in yesterday and tomorrow. What are your feelings about that idea, about that we're always getting these things, we just don't see them?
Yeah, we don't see them and we're not attuned to the frequency, the broadcast frequency. In Neil Donald Walsh's book, he talks about God is always broadcasting. He's everywhere. But some of us aren't listening. And my theory is we're not listening because we're distracted with survival and all kinds of other things. So our analytical, reactive mind is busy. And if you wanted to tune into this great jazz station, you'd have to know the frequency. Better yet, you'd have to even know there was a jazz station, and let alone the frequency to tune into. And then even then, you'd still have to get some silence around you so you could turn the channel on and listen to what's going on. And most people, all three of those are almost non-existent. They're not really aware anymore about the architect or God or Jesus or whatever, or they don't care. And they don't know how to interact, which I call my book spiritual mechanics, like the mechanics of how to interact with this quantum intelligent energy. And you have to be able, like you just said, how can you listen if you're not in present time in the now? If your mind is time traveling into the past and time traveling into the future, that means it's stuck and it's not. So anything could be going on now and you wouldn't even know it's happening unless it hits you over the head.
Yeah, pay attention. Boy, what powerful words. Easy for us to say when we're talking to somebody else and we want them to hear us. But am I paying attention? Am I paying attention? I'm drowning in miracles and affluence, and I'm wondering where is it? And this is that whole thing is, I think it was, magic shines through you when you stop chasing, which would be trying to fix the past, which is impossible to do, anxiety about the future, which doesn't change anything. But magic shines through you when you stop chasing and start being. You are always the key. I feel that that's kind of what you're talking about. And I think that that has a lot to do with that perfect life mindset that you talk about in your absolutely marvelous book, bestseller, The Invisible Architect. How does someone create that mindset? We've talked about why we don't see it, the distractions, and we all know what the machine has done since the days of the Romans is scare them, demoralize them, and bring them to the circus. And now we have this thing, 9,800 impressions a day, right, that are distracting us. And virtually everyone is telling, every one of these impressions is telling us, we'll be happy when. You'll be better off when. Buy this course, wear this cologne, be this little, get biceps this big. All distractions. And I love your little passage in there. Well, it's more than a little passage about creating this healthier, as you call it, John, the perfect life mindset. Tell us about that. How does one develop that?
Yeah, first let me back up. Originally, the title of the book was Invisible Architect, How to Design a Better Life from Within. Makes sense. And I was happy with that. But ever since 3 years old, I've had this intuition connection with the architect, just like you and I are talking. I mean, it's like Neil Donald Walsh's Conversations with God. When the architect speaks, I hear this. I've been blessed, or whatever the reason is, to hear it. So that's one of the reasons why I got into one-on-one mentoring, to help other people learn how to do that. But I was in the middle of writing the book, and then one day I got this bit of an angry, you got the subtitle wrong. What I'm talking about, how to design a better life from within. What's wrong with that? No, I'm all knowing, I'm all omniscient, I'm all loving, I'm all perfect. So why would you go just after better when I'm dealing with you and you've been dealing with me? And then my pushback was, well, I don't know, that's a big, they're going to think this is a wacko scam woo thing if I'm offering a perfect life. I don't have the cojones to do that. And then it sort of got mad at me, this quantum intelligent energy. Okay. So I changed it to how to design a perfect life from within. Very reluctantly, by the way. I was a little nervous about that. But then as I started working with it, I went, yeah, wait a minute. If we're going to tune into the frequency of God, who's all perfect, then we have to tune into that frequency. And you can't achieve perfection if your original goal isn't even to achieve perfection. So I put that title in, and it's amazing. Once I put that title in, it's almost like the architect was sitting there going, finally he believes what he's about. He's about to write finally what he believes. So now I'm going to download information to him. And it was almost like automatic writing, because I already had the chapter outline. All this information was coming. I couldn't even keep up with it. It was just so excited. So this quantum intelligent energy was very, very happy that I understood who it was, and now it was going to happen. Now, to answer your question, that's the backstory. To answer your question, in order to do that, we sort of prefaced it a little bit. One has to go into the silence. A lot of people talk about meditation and biblical fasting and going into the silence. To me, prayer is talking to God, and meditation, there's many words for that, is listening to God. And since God's frequency is extremely high, it's like a whisper. So you have to be in the silence to even have the faintest chance to hear this. So it's amazing what happens whenever I want to solve a problem or I have a quandary going on. When I go to bed, I lay down, I put my mask on, it's completely dark, plus my mask. I'm totally into the silence, and everything just starts happening, and it's amazing. So what I do is I show people how to do a little bit of deep breathing to relax, go into the silence, because that's where the infinite and the finite and the eternal, and they start hooking up. And I don't know why, it's above my pay grade, but it happens.
Yeah, that's a beautiful way. It's a beautiful way to say it. I think, and by the way, you definitely want to get on John's newsletter. He doesn't bombard you. It's absolutely powerful stuff. You can go to johnnovelloauthor.com. If you're watching this as a replay, or a post on YouTube here. The link will be down there, along with go.johnnovelloauthor.com. And get on there and explore some of the options that John has for you. So this silence thing, here's one of the biggest lie, I believe the biggest lie perpetrated on mankind. And probably initially the people that did it had good intention, but it's just turned into a control thing. Nobody's perfect except one. Well, what's really interesting, if you really study scripture, not religion, what you find out is this one who was allegedly the only one perfect said, "You'll do greater things than I." And I think designing that perfect life, in my view of the world, I want to know yours, is that we must abandon the world's idea of perfect or great. You know, it can be a woman it can be a guy in a garden in the backyard. It can be a woman singer. But we all have these places when we connect with that universal mind, with that architect, with that intuitive visitor. We all have these gifts. And if we'll just freely give them away without expectation of reciprocity, just to share, right, rather than monetize, share them, the rewards will come. At least that's what it says in Matthew. All these things will be added unto you. What are your feelings about the fact that and let me give you some evidence for you to mull over your point of view. We know as a fact, Dr. Land's great study for NASA, when they were looking for smarter people, somebody got the idea to test people a little younger, and they kept going. And we know the bell-shaped curve is 2% idiots, 2% genius, 17% slightly above, below average, 17% slightly above, and the rest an average. Well, as it turns out, that bell-shaped curve of intelligence completely wrong. Land discovered that if you test 5-year-olds, 98% of them test out as creative geniuses. And this gets conditioned out of us, and we have a false set of values of what's important, what will make us happy, and so on and so forth. So it seems to me like you're talking about returning to or rediscovering this creative genius and letting that energy or that architect work through you. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I had a cough, so I muted myself for a second. Yes, the Bible talks about, how the kingdom of God is within us. And Jesus said, I and the Father are one. But he also said the Father is greater than I. And a lot of theologians debate, well, wait a minute, is this a contradiction? What the heck does this mean? You know what I mean? And well, how did God, the invisible architect, intuitive visitor, whatever, create the world? According to it was sort of like that thought, let there be light. It was the command, it was the thought. And if we're made in that image, we have the same ability at our level, which is why thoughts do create reality. Thoughts, emotions, and beliefs and feelings eventually create reality if you know the spiritual mechanics of how to be consistent and efficient with that. And so the concept of perfection this is where I had this aha moment, which is the Father, the architect, the intuitive visitor, expresses its perfection through our desires. So we are not the power. That's the problem with the normal law of attraction, New Age stuff. I am healthy. I am great. I. It's a bit of a narcissistic attitude. Wait a minute. James Redfield, in his book, The Celestine Prophecy, talks about, and that was a fiction book, about a guy that was bored with life and wanted more fulfillment and went to Peru to study some insights. Well, he says one of the problems with humanity is we've been gradiently disconnected from the power. And as that separatism happens, more and more problems and issues happen. And so instead of if we realize that the real power is the architect, is God, and we are the distributor of that power. No difference than electricity. Electricity by itself wasn't invented. It's always been there, but we learned about the power and we learned how to channel and distribute that power. And look what electricity has done. It can electrocute you, but at the same time, it can do amazing things. We all freak out if our power goes out during a storm. We start realizing that. So if we realize that the architect, God, expresses its perfection through us, that's how we can recruit the power. I have an analogy. During World War II, let's say, there was a concept called the enemy lines and the front lines. If you were in the front lines and the enemy was charging over the hill and you didn't know that you had a command center and had air support, you'd sit there with your little M1 and bayonet, and you and your platoon would try to handle the enemy. Well, wouldn't it be better to just like get on the walkie-talkie and say, hey, I need air support. How about some napalm at coordinates 35, 25, blah, blah, blah. Next thing you know, you've handled the problem. Well, most of us walk around in life not realizing we're connected to this amazing, amazing power, but it gave us free will. So we have to invite it, understand it exists, invite it into our life, and do it with specific mechanics. And by doing that, it will express its perfection through us. But I like what you said earlier, as long as our desires and goals, I think, are aligned with the spirituality of service to others rather than not.
Right. And one of the things it says in Standing Tall, and I don't know if I stole this from you or you stole it from me, but it doesn't really matter. So, people need to hear things in different ways. That it's not going to work until I realize I am a channel and a representative of the source. Okay.
Exactly.
And like electricity, this incredible power of the mind, just like electricity, it really depends on what I plug it into. Is it going to be for good? That's the whole thing.
Yeah, because you could electrocute somebody if you use it, go down the dark side with it, or if you don't know how to use it, you get electrocuted yourself.
Right, exactly. So one of the things that this brings up is the reverse law that Alan Watts talked about. Always been fascinated the law of reverse effort. And basically he talks about the idea. The more you pursue feeling better all the time, the less satisfied you become, as pursuing something only reinforces the fact that you lack it in the first place, which is how the world wants us to think, right? We're in the world, but not of the world. It wants us to think more is better, right? Consumerism. This is pretty interesting. The more desperately you want to be rich, the more poor and unworthy you feel, regardless of how much money you actually make. The more desperately you want to be sexy and desired, the uglier you come to see yourself, regardless of your actual physical appearance. The more desperately you want to be happy and loved, the lonelier you feel, regardless of the wrong. I mean, he made it really simple. Alan Watts said, when you try to float in the water, you sink. And when you try to sink, you float, right? Which is amazing. He went on to say that when you hold your breath, you lose it, which immediately calls to mind the ancient and much neglected saying, whosoever shall try to save his soul will lose it. So this isn't about trying to get something. It's about giving, is what I'm hearing what you're saying.
Exactly. And plus, that's the difference between goals and the B being already done and thanking with advanced gratitude. The problem with a goal, it's great to be goal-oriented than no goals. But the problem with a goal is you immediately, if I'm hearing you right, and sort of this is a synonymous congruency, that if you actually, one day I will be rich or whatever, you're already stating your failure, that you do not have this in the now. Like, duh. So you're validating and agreeing with the fact that you don't have what you want. So we got to get rid of time travel here. No more time. So if you state, I am wealthy, which is a particular affirmation, and repetitively, and do all the things you're supposed to do with feeling, and there's a whole mechanical spiritual thing that goes with it. But that is much better, but you have to follow the statement of that with the advanced gratitude. And this is where I have a chapter in my book called The Different Universes. It's really important here to understand that there's not just your universe. Yes, there's your universe of thoughts and beliefs and feelings. And then there is the physical universe, universe of reality, the garden of reality, and then there's the other person's universe. And the problem with stating an affirmation is you immediately get pushback because your mind goes, well, John, you just said I am wealthy, but your bank account sucks. You got nothing in it. You don't have the rent. So you don't want to consult reality for a license to survive, because what you're doing is you're consulting the physical universe. And since be, do, have is to create that desire in your universe and have 100% certainty, and you've convinced yourself that it exists, even though it hasn't yet manifested in the physical, then it will manifest. But if you just say, one day I will be wealthy, now you're stating two things. We already know you're not wealthy. And on top of it, in your universe, you're stating you're not wealthy. So you have no be, do, have going on. You're stuck on have, and it doesn't work.
Right. So I think what you're talking about is how to, and you cover this beautifully in your book. Again, folks, you definitely want to get this, The Invisible Architect. The desire thieves. Tell us about the desire thieves.
Well, and by the way, you want to get my book too, because Mark wrote an unbelievable foreword to the book that I'm glad he wrote it after the book, because if you could have wrote of course you can't write a foreword usually in a event, but if he'd have wrote the foreword first, I'd have been scared to try to like follow it. It was a chapter unto itself. So if you get the book and just read Mark's foreword, you'll actually have some spiritual gain. Anyway, thank you for that, Mark. But what was our question again? I can't believe it. I forgot.
I think you're talking about guarding against the desire thieves.
All right, the desire thieves. So if you don't fully understand what I just talked about, the different universes, your mind will quickly look at the physical universe and give you pushback to your statement of gratitude and thinking that you already have this. And if you agree with that, then your original desire in your be, do, have will be alloyed or diluted, or you'll eventually even forget about it. Now, desire thieves can come from within, your own pushback, your own negative thoughts based on experiences and whatever. It could come from a friend. You might have a goal to start a new company, a new software, whatever, and somebody goes, oh, John, that's sort of been done before. The chances of that getting off the ground, and you agree with that, then that will end up being a desire thief, and you'll probably drop your whole goal or your whole concept. So desire thieves, there's a chapter called Guarding Your Mind. You have to learn how to guard your mind from anything that can take you away from the integrity of your desire in the be, do, have formula. So that's what desire thieves are.
Yeah, that's a beautiful thing. Your opinion. I think the reason that most people set goals, besides the fact they were trained by the self-help industry, which is let me be kind here. A $51 billion industry with only 2 people I know that offer quantifiable results. Yeah, they'll tell you anecdotal stories, but they don't teach the things that you're talking about. I believe that most people pick goals based on the conditioning they've had. And so it's really easy for these desire thieves to knock it down. I think when someone finds their real gift, their real heart's desire, as expressed by the invisible architect, the intuitive visitor, their divinity, whatever, that they can't be discouraged. We all know that desire is not enough. You've got to want it with every fiber of your being, and it can't be a self-centered thing. What are your feelings about that?
Well, what was the name of your acronym for your course to find your major desire? I can't remember.
The Master Key Experience.
No, but what was the part of it was for us to write down.
DMP.
Definite major purpose.
Yeah, definite. Thank you. Thank you. Definite
Thanks, Dave.
major purpose. Yeah. And that actually is what you're talking about, because when you find that and have clarity, you are hooked up to the architect, because you now have that power. So it's you and Bruce Lee walking down the alley. And so if a gang comes up and says, hey man, hey, white boy, give me your, or hey, whatever, give me your money. You're sitting there with confidence and you're going, I don't really think you'd want to do this. That's not a good. And they're looking at each other like, what are you talking about? And they said, well, I really don't think you want to do this. And snap your finger and good old Bruce Lee shows up and the game's all over. I actually had this happen. I was in the Boston Commons in Boston studying jazz at Berklee College of Music, and I had a fully trained guard attack dog with commands and hand signals. And I went down to pick up my check in a not so great area of Boston. I was walking through the Boston Commons, not a good thing to do, but I had my shepherd with me. So he was off the leash and he's roaming around. And literally, this is what happened. Two guys came up and I heard some footsteps. I turned around and they were sort of under one of the lights inside the park. The guy pulled out a gravity knife and this big blade came out. And he literally says, wrong timing, buddy. And I looked at him, and I'm a martial artist, but 2 or 3 guys I don't want to take on with a knife, right? But I kind of laughed because I knew I had this shepherd about 30 yards away roaming around, who's a fully trained guard dog. So I said exactly what I just said. I said, I don't think you want to do that. And they both looked at each other and made some wisecrack. And I did this. This clap is my telling him to heel. Something's wrong. So as soon as I did it and I looked to the left, and like Rin Tin Tin, if you're old enough to remember him, he's running 30 miles an hour towards me. And he was trained to come towards me and circle me twice and then heel by my side. And then I hook up my leash. So he did that. And the weirdest thing happened is almost as if like he did it on purpose. He ran between the two guys. And they were like, whoa. And they looked at each other, and I said, you see what I mean? Put the knife away and walked away. I went home with my dog and fed him a steak. So when you have your DMP, you're hooked up, because I believe the architect implants these constructive desires in us, and we have to pay attention. So now you're hooked up to the power. So all you got to do, like I said earlier, is distribute that power. But if you're not hooked up to the power, you come up with other kinds of purposes that aren't really yours because of society and brainwashing your parents, God knows what, reading books, then you're not really hooked up to the power. So the dream thieves can walk in the middle of the night and just take it away.
Yeah. I think a great metaphor for all of this goes all the way back, I don't know, 400 or 500 years BC, the Tower of Babel. A lot of people that are embryonic in their understanding think that's how Greeks learn to speak Greek and Italians. That doesn't what it means. It's the babble in your mind. The reality is they were trying to build something external to get closer to the architect rather than internally. And eventually it's going to break down and it's just going to be a lot of noise. And boy, there's more noise than ever out there. So what we're both really talking about is the same thing. I'm interested in your fundamentals in coaching people, how to separate. How do I know this is really mine? Like one of the exercises I bring people through is say, write down the top 5 things that you want. Okay. And take 5 minutes and come back and look at that list and ask yourself, why did I pick that? What influenced me to pick that? And these false values that we get taught move us away. So we've talked a lot about that. And then if people do pick things, it's easy for them to be discouraged by these desire thieves because it's not really their heart's desire. John, how do you help people discover that world within and really connect and know this is really me? This is the real me. This is my truth. I now know I'm a channel and a representative of the source. How do they? Is it a little scary for people at first, do you think, to trust that voice because they've been away from it so long? You talked about the mechanics. Maybe we should start there. Let's get into some of your solutions to hook up with that architect, with that intuitive visitor, with their divinity, so they now are choosing for the greater good from their heart with the source driving all of it with humility.
Yeah, exactly. Well, in my book, I named that definite major purpose your life's blueprint. And some of the tips that I give, I just want to put them in order and take a look at them, is ask yourself the question, what really drives you? In other words, forget about money, forget about survival, forget about everything. Because the moment you make it congruent to money, your mind's going to filter out all kinds of things that could be your definite major purpose or what drives. So ask yourself what drives you. Now when you do this, you should be in the silence, nobody on, and really, really listen. And then ask yourself, do you have any natural skills or talents? I was working with this one lady and she goes, well, I don't really have anything to do. I'm just, a housewife and, blah, 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 blah. I goes, no, come on. So I kept prompting her and she goes, well, I like to sew. And I go, oh, so do you have any passion for that? She goes, oh my God, yes, I'm always making blankets for the children and blah. I said, well, I don't have passion for that. I could never even learn how to do that. I wouldn't have any patience to do that. So what's wrong with that? Well, you can't really make any money and get there it was. And I said, no, 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 that's not the exercise. So then that's when I said, so if you were independently wealthy, she had a day job and her husband worked, uh, uh, what would you be doing? She goes, I'd probably maybe start a company and sew and make blankets and hats and things for people. And I said, well, what's wrong with that? She says, well, I never thought it was right or wrong. Anyway, the idea is if you know how to ask questions, and that's where sometimes it helps to have a guide or a mentor for accountability and an expert to like sort of, steer you in the right direction. And you keep working at it, you'll find that God didn't just create you. You're not a rock. You got some stuff going on that you don't even know that's maybe been swept under the rug because of education and because of trying to make a living and blah, blah, blah. Happens all the time when I used to play in clubs. I'd get the guy come up, that's drunk. Hey man, can you play Misty for me? And then I'd listen to him and for a minute, maybe out on a break. And I'd say, do you like that tune? He goes, yeah, I used to play years. And next thing you know, I'm being his shrink. And he's telling me his failed definite purpose that a long time ago he did want to play. And for various survival reasons in the family, he couldn't take lessons anymore, but he always had that in him. He was only like about 50 years old. And that was a failed purpose for him. So I kind of rehabbed it a little bit. And I says, well, I give lessons and I have music books out. It's never too late. So anyway, to make a long story short, he ended up buying one of my books. And then about a year and a half later, he sent me that he was back playing again. He goes, I'm never going to play like you, but thank you because I feel like I'm doing something that's got something to do with me. And that made me feel good because that's one of the things that I do and that I like doing. That's why I transferred, even though I've had a successful music career, I realized one day when I wrote this book that music's great, but it's entertainment and it's inspirational. It does raise a person's frequency temporarily, but they still got to go back to their life. When I got the urge from the architect to pay it forward and write this book, and it became a bestseller, I went, wow. Now that has given me passion. I can one-on-one raise a person's frequency and get them hooked back up. And what would that do? And so then I ended up realizing that a major goal of mine, I just want to state it, is my vision is to transform the quality of a person's life by raising their mindset frequency towards the invisible architect frequency, your inner power, and teach you the spiritual mechanics of interacting with this power so you can achieve your highest divine self. And I went, if I can do that one-on-one, I'm raising collectively the frequency of the entire planet. And even though that's like a spoon on a beach with the sand, it gives me great joy.
Yeah, well, I think that's absolutely elegant. I think that when you have raised your frequency, when one raises frequency and is in tune, right? Not with the world, we're in the world, but not of the world, right? That we find purpose. But our purpose isn't what we do. Our purpose, when we're executing our purpose, is what happens to other people. What's your feeling about that?
What I believe, 100%. I believe true enlightenment is not sitting on top of a mountaintop and contemplating your navel and just going, yeah, I can be. There's three levels of being that you can be uh, and just be there and perceive, which a lot of people strive for. But this is an action universe and a social universe. How are you helping mankind just because you can be and control your thoughts and be in at what? Serenity of beingness. Okay, maybe that's cool for you, but real enlightenment to me is if you arrived to the afterlife and you were in a line and the big question was, how did you service others, sir? And you couldn't answer, or you said, well, I can just be, or I did this and that, but you didn't really service others. I think the answer would be, okay, you need to go to that line because you didn't service. So I think real enlightenment has to do with not forcing yourself, by the way, to serve others, but finding that definite major purpose, like you taught in your course, which is incredible, by the way. Please, the master key is what I'm doing one-on-one, Mark is doing with groups, which is just amazing to me. Anyway, true enlightenment is service to others. And by giving with, like I think you just said, with no reciprocity, there is no such thing. The reciprocity comes back to you in ways you can't even imagine. Sometimes financially, sometimes in just happiness. What would it be worth to go to bed every night with no stress and being happy and waking up being happy? Are you kidding me? What is that worth? I mean,
Yeah.
most people that have a lot of money would pay $1 million for that, you know?
Yeah.
So that's my answer. That's enlightenment is service to others.
Yeah. Okay. So I think, you know, we've touched on this a couple of times. I call it karma. In your book, you have it the law of cause and effect. Karma being defined as not some tutti frutti 60 thing. You cut me off in traffic, that's bad karma, man. Karma as actually realizing that you're making a decision while you're making it and what the ramifications are of that decision. Karma is also known as the law of cause and effect. Hanel wrote about it in the Master Key System. Wallace Wattles wrote about it. By the way, he made a great point about Wallace Wattles. He's got gratitude in the certain way twice. The certain way, there's a certain way to be great, certain way to be healthy, certain way to be wealthy. It's all basically the same thing. It starts with gratitude for what you have, but then the fifth step in the certain way, it's not that winners do certain things, they do things in a certain way. The fifth step, and you talked about this beautifully, is having gratitude for it already coming, everything that's coming.
Yeah, that's the advanced gratitude as compared to
exactly.
To me, I think you even had an exercise in the book to write down all these things you're grateful for, right? If I recall.
Right. Yeah,
And
the gratitude cards.
Yeah, exactly. That's an amazing. I mean, forget going to a therapist. I mean, if you just did that if you are depressed, if you just did that, you would be out of your depression pretty quickly. But that's easy to do. You win the lottery. Oh, thank you. Oh my God, now I can do, or whatever. You find the right. But advanced gratitude is tricky if you don't know the difference between the universes, because in advanced gratitude, you have to thank I like to call it the quantum intelligent energy, because then it doesn't get mixed up with organized religions or an anthropomorphic God or whatever. So
Right.
Quantum intelligent energy, electricity is an energy, but it's not intelligent, it has to be directed. But the quantum intelligent energy, the invisible architect, has its own reasoning and its own beingness, whatever. But when you are being able to thank the universe in advance for something that you want to manifest, despite dream thieves, despite pushback, and learn how to do that and efficiently do that. The only way to do that is to realize that if your universe is separate from the physical, then you don't let the fact that it hasn't appeared in the physical stop you. It's in your universe. If I say, hey, Mark, dream up a pink elephant and put it on top of the Empire State Building and make it do cartwheels. You could do that. Some people might have trouble with that because they're related to the physical, but you could do that in your imagination universe, which Neil Goddard talks a lot about imagination, the power of. And
Yep.
but if I told you to do that pink elephant thing on top of the Empire State Building physical, that would take a lot of work. And that's the difference. You have to be able to have total certainty that what you're trying to manifest is already done in your universe. And you think with advanced gratitude and you keep that thought there. And then when the dream thieves come in, and you and I talked about this, you can use thought substitution to quickly get rid of that thought and substitute the ideal thought or any thought, because in the physical universe, we already know two objects can't occupy the same space. If they did, you and I would fall through the universe, fall through the earth right now. It just so happens in the spiritual or the mental universe, we can't think of two thoughts simultaneously. At least I can't. I can think of them sequentially, but not simultaneously. So if you got a dream thief thought, the way to get rid of it, doesn't Waddles talk about that in about taking a pebble out of your shoe? If you were walking down the street and you had a pebble in your shoe, would you keep walking on it, or would you just stop and take the pebble out and continue walking? Same thing. So if you got these negative dream thieves happening, you're going to just put up with them, or you're going to just get rid of them. Take the shoe off, get rid of the pebble. In this case, substitute a better thought. So that is how that manifestation works. Is you have to understand that your universe is different than the physical. And when you do that, then the manifestation can be a done deal. Use advanced gratitude. So the be, do, have is you got your be, you got your do. Imagine it already being done, and then the circumstances. And here's the other thing that's crazy. Don't look at your circumstances as you are doing that now. You're looking at those circumstances which you manifested a long time ago. Just like when you look at a star, we might have mentioned this before, the light that's coming to you, you're not looking at the star is looking at you. That's 1,000 light years away, and it just arrived to you. So don't look at your circumstances as something that you can't change. Those things you manifested, though, that's the good news. You helped co-create those a long time ago, which means you can unmanifest them if you have the correct be and don't let the dream thieves steal your desires.
That's beautifully said. It's beautifully said. So, this for me is a huge takeaway. You're talking about the law of substitution, that we have control over our thoughts. It's right in that book, The 7 Laws of the Mind. I think people know more about their cell phones than they know about their own mind. And getting linked up with John, and again, we'll put a site down below, to be able to pick up bits and pieces and maybe explore one-on-one mentorship with John. But regardless, this law of substitution is the big thing I'm taking. We can only hold one thought at a time. And I think what we're talking about, what you're seeing with John, I want to go down another road and then come back to this as the big takeaway, because I think I think people are so out of touch with that architect. They're so out of touch with the intuitive visitor. And I think it's really remarkable. John's first wife had a brutal battle with cancer and lost the battle, a long, tough battle. And then several months later, over a year later, he had this thought about a high school sweetheart, and coincidentally, right? God's way, coincidence is God's way of staying anonymous. His high school sweetheart. Yeah,
I like that.
I stole it. Steal it back.
I'll steal it back.
Okay. Is that, and basically the sweetheart reaches out to him, and after a couple of exchanges and a couple of conversations, John invites her out to LA, and she gets a ticket for the plane. And then something quite remarkable happened, which I think really fortified a shift in your total journey. So you're coming out of this grieving period, this wonderful thing happens, and how easy would it for us to be to say, I can't wait till she comes, I can't wait till she, but something happened, and I think this is most remarkable. Would you share the rest of that with us, John?
Yeah, that was my burning bush method, my burning bush biblical wake-up call. I had already had my interactions with the architect and hadn't written the book or anything yet. And so she goes, John, I'm going to come out. She books the flight, and I went, great, I'm going to be here. Can't wait to see you after 36 years, because she was my first girlfriend. And it's been 11 months. I've been grieving, lost my wife, and we were talking on the phone. The sparks were flying, and I was sort of thinking, wow, this is a breath of fresh air. I never was looking for another soulmate, but something's happening here, real exciting. So, about 5 days before her flight, you got to remember now, I've already had this hookup going on, so I trusted this voice. They said, the voice says, John, something is wrong with Barb's flight. End that day. You need to tell her to change the flight. Now, I didn't do any pushback anymore. I already trusted this voice. So I call her up and I goes, you haven't seen me in 36 years. This is going to seem kind of crazy, but you need to change that flight. So she's thinking, oh, I've got booty call or something else going on in my life. And I said, no, no, no. You'll find out more about this. Trust me. So she was, balking at it. I finally had to yell at her and get a little stern, which was a little weird for me because I just met her. I said, no, no, no. I'm not going to be here. Change the damn flight. So she changes the flight to Friday. Now I forget about it. Right? Forget about it. So Tuesday, I wake up at 10:30, which in LA and in New York, she was in Virginia, so East Coast time, that was 1:30. And I had just checked my answer machine before I went to bed. There was no messages. I wake up, the thing's blinking like crazy, billions of messages. I'm going, what the heck happened? So I started listening. Oh my God, John, turn on the TV. How did you know? And about 8 of them from her and other people were calling. And so I turn the TV on and I see these 2 planes crashing into the Twin Towers. I'm thinking there's a movie and it's on all these channels. And I'm, what the heck? So I listen to the message and I find out this is real. Then she calls me back and she goes, and guess what flight I was on? She was on flight 77 out of Dulles. And the architect, my inner power, that voice that I heard when I was 3 years old, which is explained in my book, told me something was wrong with that. Now, can you imagine if I would have invalidated that message and just switched it off? I would have lost my potential second wife. And so if that wasn't the wake-up call that totally told me now that the architect is sovereign and knows what it's doing,
Okay.
nothing would. And so she came out 5 days later, we hit it off, and she moved in with me a year or 2 later, and we got married, and I had 20 beautiful years with her.
Yeah. So that's the plane that hit the Pentagon that she was on, right?
Yeah, the Flight 77, that's the one that
77.
turned around and hit the Pentagon.
The
So they
Pentagon.
say.
So they say. So basically, this second soulmate, she passed.
She passed 3.5 years ago.
So you have these two wonderful, beautiful women in your life.
20-year beautiful relationships, yeah.
Yeah, and obviously this is grief, but you're dealing with it in a very unusual way. Would you share that with our listeners here? Because I think it's important.
Well, the interesting thing is, it's funny, I wrote the other book. I don't even know if you know about the first book I wrote in metaphysics. It was called The Song That Never Ended, after my first wife passed from breast cancer. And I had all these after-death communications from the afterlife from her that were so real that I didn't want to be a husband in denial. So I hired 8 or 10 mediums of the top ones in the world, blind phone calls, no name, and my wife came through in 8 out of 10 of those, and I knew it was her because the information was only between me and her. So I wrote a book called The Song That Never Ended, which is supposed to be inspirational and helping people understand that their loved ones just moved on to a different room and they made a transition. Now, that's easier said than done when you lose the sacred vehicle that they're in, I understand, but that book was all about the unbelievable communications and spiritual growth that I learned from losing my first wife. So when I lost my second wife, I already had that under my belt. And the interesting thing is she knew she was going to go before me, because 5 months before this happened, and she had no sickness or anything, she said, John, she called me Jasmine, I'm so glad we moved to Nashville. I love our new home, because she's an interior designer. She designed it. She goes, but I don't think I'm going to be living like your parents 10 or 15 more years. And She just knew her race was about to end. They say that is true sometimes. So when it happened, I kind of connected all the red dots and I went, you know what? That was a pre-life script. This lifetime, when I came aboard with my new vehicle called John Novello, my new ID tag, I think I already had a script that I was going to have two incredible relationships, lose them, and the resultant personal growth would be unbelievable. And it has been. So that's how I've been getting through, is to look at, okay, what is the message? What is the purpose? And let me concentrate on the two beautiful 20 years that I had and the personal growth in the rest of my race. So I'm just so excited now about the rest of my race. And if it's meant to be to have a third one, I'm sure the architect will send me one.
Man, it's a beautiful, beautiful way to look at it. This big takeaway for me is we've talked about the world and how, you know, other people's values are put on us, and our parents may be the most well-meaning people in the world, but they came out of the same system: buy more, you know, get more, bigger is better, and so on and so forth. And we have all these values and all this noise. You have found a way to invite and connect with the invisible architect. Could you just expand on the significance of that before we wrap up?
Yeah, I can't imagine my life without that connection. And in my book, I explain how it happened and all the details and at least 20 different miracles, let alone the one that we just discussed. And I use it as a constant source of advice and counsel, and it's free. And
Right.
it doesn't matter what is going on in a person's life. If they connect, and I show them how to do it with the one-on-one mentoring, their life changes, and I don't tell them they're connected. They tell me when it happens. They know this isn't a subjective thing. This is sort of an objective, call it a religious experience if you want. But when you finally turned your radio station to the architect station and you learn how to listen and silence your mind and pay attention, initially it's a little tricky and you'll have doubts and you'll invalidate it. But once you get used to working with it, eventually you realize it's sovereign and you'll trust it and you'll have that faith. And faith is not just faith is an actual commodity. It's actually an important part of the invisible architect, because I believe the quantum intelligent energy field, take it from a physics point of view, everything we've ever wanted in our life already exists in the quantum intelligent energy field. So you call this quantum manifestation or quantum spirituality. So in order to manifest it, be like a magnet going under a metal object, and you had a bunch of filings on top and they're just all in every which way, but you put the magnet underneath and dragged it across, they'd all stand up at attention and go in a certain direction, right? Well, you're trying to manifest. Most people fail in manifestation because they're trying to do it themselves. And that's the biggest failure. You're not the manifester. You may be you may instigate that desire, but just like when you build a house, you're the architect, but you hire a great company to carry it out. Well, the company that you want to hire is the invisible architect, the intuitive visitor, the creator of all. It has way more power and imagination to do anything that you want, but it gave us free will. And so you have to realize that you are the distributor of that power. It's already existing there. You just have to get it to help you align all those little metal filings into that manifestation that you want. So if you believe fully and have an advanced gratitude that that desire already exists, it's sort of like the post office calling you up and say, hey, John, your package has arrived. Your number is 341. You go down to the post office and you give him the little yellow paper, 341, and he finds your package and gives it to you. But if you never got that communication, you wouldn't even know the package was there, would you? So that is the secret of the secret.
Yeah, and I know that in your book you're not saying that it'll just show up. The
No.
synchronicities, the things you need to do. It's like Wallace Waddle always said, your thoughts will impel a mountain of gold to you, and you'll be impelled to the mountain, but it's not going to mine itself, mint itself, and roll down the hill, right? So what
Right.
it is. So as we wrap up here, we always like to wrap up with just some staccato questions. First thing that comes to mind, we realize if we ask these to you 2 hours later, your answers might be different, but let's just have a bit of fun here. First one, John, what's your favorite word?
My favorite word is faith.
Beautiful. What's your least favorite word?
Can't.
What turns you on creatively, spiritually, or emotionally?
Helping others achieve their desires.
What turns you off?
Trying to communicate to somebody these principles and having them just not believe you and shut you down and think you're crazy drives me nuts.
Yeah. Favorite curse word?
Probably shit. Oh, shit.
Okay, I feel that one.
Can I interject something?
No, go ahead.
My father, who was not a philosopher, a very normal guy, when I left home, he actually sat me down to give me some advice. I was like 19, and I'm thinking, well, my father never did this kind of thing. And he says, look, son, you're going out into the world. Just want you to realize something. There are people out there who think their shit, this has to do with the word shit. There are people out there that think their shit doesn't stink. And be careful of those people. And here's the most important thing. When you think your shit doesn't stink, you are in deep shit.
I'm stealing that one.
I never forgot that. And then when I arrived to Boston, I ran into a couple of those people. And to this day, thank you, Dad. I don't know where you stole that from, but I think it's a brilliant piece of philosophy.
Yeah, it really is. What sound or noise do you love?
I don't know. I think waterfalls is my favorite sound. I even use it at night to fall asleep to, even if it's fake on my iPhone.
You got to get over here, man. We got hundreds of them.
Oh, I know.
We have the highest swamp on the planet.
Yeah, what is it called? The Ikea swamp or something?
Yep.
Yeah, I did that path. I walked it.
Right. And so because of the porousness of all the volcanic rock, there's waterfalls everywhere. That water's because this is the wettest spot on Earth. Anyway,
Yeah, it's over 400 inches of rain a year, if I recall.
400 to 700. You got a great memory.
Wow.
What sound or noise do you hate?
Explosions.
What other profession other than what you're doing now would you like to attempt?
Well, I've done music. Now I'm into philosophy. Well, that's a good one. For some reason, I only have those two as my main guys. I don't know what I'd like to attempt other than it's too late for me to climb mountains, but I've always wanted to climb mountains for a living, but I'm a little too old for climbing Mount Everest.
What profession would you never want to try?
I don't know if you'd call it a profession, but I wouldn't want to do a regular job, cookie cutter job. I don't see how people can do that. I have great respect for them, and on the other hand, I think, oh my God, if you only knew.
Right. Last question. If heaven exists, what would you like to hear the invisible architect say when you arrive at the pearly gates?
John, congratulations for helping create heaven on earth. You get to go over there.
Fantastic. Fantastic. Make sure you check the link down below. And if you're seeing this someplace else, it's John Novello, Novello, author.com. Same site, only G-O. And the same if it's the same, John Novello, author.com. Check that out. Get on his newsletter.
At the end, though, is a /register. So go.johnnovelloauthor.com/register.
Yeah.
And then they can book a free consultation with me. I'd love to talk to you all.
John, great to have you on the call. Peace and love. Dave, you
Thank
good?
you.